Hello, you are watching my YouTube channel. I'm your host, kamranarshad. Today, I've invited a guest to my vlog, and I'm going to discuss about his life, his visions, his goals, and most importantly, his field as well. So today, we have the pleasure of sitting down with a distinguished individual who wears multiple hats in literary world, an accomplished author and a seasoned writer. Join us as we delve into the mind and experiences of his creative powerhouse. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today, Jason.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here.
Okay, that's that. Actually, first of all, tell us about yourself. What have you done in your life, and what's your aim? Uh, Tell us something people don't know about you.
Okay, well, I'm Jason Monaghan. I live in England now. I've been an archaeologist for much of my career, although I've done other things. I've worked in banking by accident, and I've been an anti-money laundering investigator again by accident. And I've investigated shipwrecks and Roman pottery, and excavated uh, Roman fort and a Roman village. And I'm also a crime writer on the side as well. So I've written a series of archaeological detective stories,
Mhm.
and I'm currently writing a series of historical thrillers based around the black shirt movement in Britain, in addition to doing all the archaeology publications as well, just getting on with life.
All right, that's great. Okay, let me start the properly interview. Actually, I just wanted to know about your journey. What have you done in your life? Do you have aims or goals, Jason? If you have, you can share with us. Actually, how many goals have you achieved
Hey,
so far?
uh, aims and goals. Well, I when I left university, I had an aim to write a novel, get published, become an expert in something, get married, get a house, and be on television. And I'd done it all by the time I was 30. And I went, oh, okay, now what?
It's very good thing you get married and if you are happy.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we've done all that, and then life just serves curveballs at you all the time, and things happen. So goals now, um, because I have a much of my career behind me,
Mm,
I'm running an archaeological project with a group of my friends, volunteers,
mm,
and I'm also working on my thrillers at at the same time, well, alternately, really.
mm,
Um, and so my current ambition is to get my excavation
mm,
underway this year,
mm.
to write up the book about the Roman fort,
All right.
and and then I also want to push forward with the thriller series.
Mm.
So so I've got about five things on the stock at the moment and juggle from one to the other.
All right. That's perfect, Jason. Jason, tell me, how did you get into this? I'm asking about your writing skill and authoring as well. How did you get into this?
Okay, well, I always wanted to write. So, as a teenager, I'd write terrible stories in school notebooks. And then my mother bought me a typewriter, and I wrote a sort of young adult post-apocalyptic story when I was about 16, which is terrible.
Mm,
Um, and and then, of course, I went to university. And once I'd finished university and come out, and my first book was actually a non-fiction book. It was an archaeology book. And then I started trying to write novels again. I started with science fiction first of all, which a lot of young men do,
okay.
um, and I didn't get anywhere. I then wrote a thriller, a bit like
Mm,
a Desmond Bagley. I knew Desmond Bagley's widow vaguely at the time, and I wrote a Desmond Bagley style thriller, which I started sending out to agents. And about the third agent I sent it to was a top London agency, and she rang me up, Lisanne Radici, and said, "Well, um, you can clearly write,
mm,
but there's a lot of stuff like this around. So why don't
mm,
you write me a thriller or a mystery based in the world of archaeology?"
mm. All right.
So yeah, so that's how it started. And I already had an idea for a story, and so I said, "Oh, I've got a story called Byron's Shadow." So I started it and realized, oh, I, I'm not getting anywhere here. I got halfway through, I got stuck. But then I had another novel I'd written in my science, in my sort of, it was going to be a horror story, and I didn't finish it. What about that one? So I took my archaeology characters, put them into that one, and finished it. And that became a novel called Darkness Rises. And she took that, and then the publisher said, "Oh, let's have 3 more." So Byron's Shadow became, because that one
Yeah.
became the second in the
Okay.
series.
That's great.
And I was 30, so I was quite young to be doing that.
Really? Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
When did you find yourself that you have a inside? There is inside a writer in you. When did you find it?
I think as a child, really. I mean, at
Acha.
school, 7, 8, 9, writing what you'd call fan fiction these days, taking characters out of books I was reading as a child and writing my own stories about them. And it just never stops. And I keep thinking I ought to stop one day, but no. I keep thinking, oh no, another idea. I was emailed yesterday and said, "Oh, can we have another black shirt story?" I thought, "Oh, I'm not sure I've got another one." And then by this morning, I thought, no, I have got another one. So it just bubbles under and can't get away from it, really.
Oh, really glad to hear it. Yes. Okay. As both an author and an archaeologist, how do your experiences in the field directly influence the themes and narratives you explore in your written works?
Right. So the archaeology series, people have said I was at a conference recently, and the moderator said, who was also an archaeologist, said she'd read my books, and she said this really felt like the archaeology world that she knew. And they sort of surprise people because most people have got the idea of archaeologists who wear pith helmets and we're all sort of posh upper class Englishmen. And actually, in reality, in archaeology, certainly the 1980s, 1990s, when I was a young archaeologist, it was dirty, it was cold, we were very badly paid, if we were paid at all, and we're all alone, and it was boring. And so this comes through in the stories and gives it a sort of a sense of reality. Once you've, I mean, excuse me if I offend any of your listeners, but the first time I excavated a skeleton, I had to use a teaspoon. And when you scraped a teaspoon across human bone, you never forget the sound. And it's one of those things. And when you're walking into a site hut on an archaeological excavation, and you can feel the grit grating beneath your feet, and you're drinking your cup of tea, and there's dirt in
Okay.
all these things come through in the writing of the novels. And then when it comes to the actual archaeology books, I then started to find that I'm not just, some archaeologists just produce a book, and I started wanting to write the archaeology books, actually make them interesting and make them flow as if they're a bit of a novel. So the two sort of balanced off against each other. Yeah.
Actually, well, we have heard from the people that if you want to successful in the life, you have to be consistent, right? Then how do you consistent with your field?
Being consistent.
Yeah.
It's always very difficult because you always, when you're starting a new project, you always look at this big pile of paper, or these days an empty screen, and goodness, where do we start? And then you pick up the threads. I mean, for example, I've just recently reread the first 2 novels I ever wrote, just to put back in my mind about how I was writing back then. And I was actually quite pleased. I thought, are these going to be dreadful? But no, I was actually quite pleased. And then pushing that forward. But of course, these days we have editors. I know a very good editor who helps me in my early stage books, and then my publishers also have 2 editors who knock the corners off. So that that really helps in terms of the quality of what's coming out.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, Jason, can you share an example of a significant archaeological discovery or project that has inspired or informed your writing, and how it shaped your perspective as an author?
Right. Okay. Well, there were several actually. I've been very lucky to be involved in 3 or 4 quite exciting projects in my life, and
Mm,
being given the projects sort of quite young, and yeah, I'm being quite lucky with them. I think the one of the ones that's influenced me most is when I did my PhD in Kent,
mm,
in Eastern England.
mm.
That part of Kent is very
You're
marshy.
from England, right?
Yes, I'm from England. Yeah,
Okay. When did you
and
born? I mean, I'm asking about the city. London,
oh
Johannesburg.
no, I was born in I was born in a village near Rotherham, which is near Sheffield, which is in South
Okay.
Yorkshire.
Oh.
But I've moved around. I went to university in London.
Mm,
I lived in Kent. I've lived in York. I'm now
mm,
back in Yorkshire, and I lived in the Channel Islands off the
mm.
coast of France for 35 years as well. So I've moved about.
Right.
So I'm not one of these writers who writes about one place. I writing about lots of places.
Mm,
And but Kent was particularly interesting because the tide goes out about 3 miles
mm,
in the Kent estuary. So there's this great expanse of about 10 miles of little marshy islands and mudflats and creeks and things, which is where I was doing my archaeological research as a student.
mm,
And I got lots of stories from people who were working out in the marshes, other archaeologists, amateur archaeologists
mm,
and they populated my stories almost ever since. I've got a thriller which hasn't been published actually, in which
mm,
uh,
mm,
the, the villains bury the body out there.
mm,
And there's in the first one of my Geoffrey Flint novels,
mm,
there's an isolated farm on the marshland, and there's a chase on the marshland. So that whole bleak East England marshland, has come into quite a few of my stories. And the
mm,
fact that there's things hidden out there, the
mm,
landscape's been buried by the sea. That's it's actually quite a creepy place to be, and quite a sort of
mm,
spooky idea that this area is now under ankle deep water, but there are Roman villages and things out there covered
mm,
in the sea. So that's influenced me quite a lot.
mm. Yes, are you satisfied what you are? I mean, what you thought or wanted to be? Are you at that place?
Um, so I thought I wanted to live there. No, it's I don't know. It's bleak and it's cold. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Okay, balancing the roles of author and archaeologist can be challenging, right? How do you manage these dual passions? And do you find any synergy between your creative writing process and your archaeological pursuits?
Okay. Well, I swap from one to the other.
Mm,
When I first started, I was worried
mm,
that people, if I started writing quite, quite pulpy
mm,
detective stories, people would no longer take me seriously as an archaeologist.
mm,
So when I first started writing, I had a pen name because I wanted to separate my
mm,
serious archaeology books from my slightly trivial murder mysteries.
mm,
But actually, nobody cared because people knew it was me. People who were in archaeology knew it was me.
mm,
So when the ebooks came out, I
mm,
just said, just forget the pen name, put them all under me, and that was a way of bringing it together.
mm,
Because one of the ways that the internet has changed publishing
mm,
is that pen names are almost irrelevant now. Because Google searches, if you wanted to
mm,
say, who
mm.
is Jason Foss on
Yeah.
Google, you would find out in moments it was me in the old
Mm,
days. And also the way the search engines work, um, the more mentions of me there are on the internet, the more likely you are to find me. So whether I'm writing an archaeology book or a thriller or giving an archaeological paper or I'm in a newspaper article, it all comes together and builds up my digital footprint. So having a
mm,
pen name to distract was just a waste of time.
mm,
So so that's how it affects being being an author. I think it probably distracted me from pushing forward as an archaeologist, as a fully fledged career. I never made professor.
mm,
Um, I became director of museums for Guernsey,
mm,
which was great. On the back of my archaeology and my writing, and weirdly, because I'd worked in a bank. And they wanted, and that gave me 10 years of management experience. So I ended up running a museum. But I mean, at the moment, I've got an archaeology book to write, and so I sent off the manuscript for the edit of my last thriller yesterday to the publisher. So when we finish our broadcast today, I'm going to open up my file on my archaeology book, which I'm writing about the Roman fort on the island of Alderney. And I'm going to be working on that really for the next month to the exclusion of almost everything else. So just really just have to switch focus from from one to the other. And then in my quiet moments when I go for a walk or something, I'm going to be thinking about the next novel, because think about the archaeology books, you can't really think about them away from the text, because it's facts and it's figures and it's diagrams, and I'm sitting there writing it. But if I'm in the shower or if I'm going for a walk in our local woods, that's when I'll start to think about the next thriller. It does mess up my research time, because I like to research in the afternoons. I mean, you can see the books here. I've got 14 of these bookcases all around my room
You
here.
have a book gallery. I can see that.
Yeah. So I have to decide, what am I going to be sitting and reading? And I have been researching the next novel, and I'm going to have to stop because I've got a big pile of archaeology books to read about Roman forts in the Western Empire. And people keep sending me links on the internet and articles and things. I thought, I'm going to have to sit down for a few weeks and read all these, or do the next book. And it does sometimes make you wonder, when I get an invite to something, what am I talking about?
Right.
Oh, come and talk to our group. And I'll say, what am I talking about? Do you want books? Do you want archaeology? Do you want a bit of both? And usually I've got the last slide on when I do a public presentation. It's called the advert. So if I'm talking about archaeology, the last slide will be about my filler books. Likewise, if I'm talking about the books, the last slide will be about the archaeology books. This is the advert, just to try to get the people who are interested in one interested in the other. Because it's sort of splitting. Sometimes splitting your effort is difficult. There is a saying, plow a single furrow, or do one thing, do it well. And I've never done that, because I've always had lots of things on my plate and had to mix those. Because the other thing I like doing is traveling. So I've just got back from Thailand, and I've just booked a safari in Botswana, and I've got an excavation coming up, and I've got 6 conferences coming up. So I'm not here half the time, or a third of the time. So I do like traveling. So I've got to juggle that around as well. In fact, I'm going to pack this laptop away because I've got a 6-hour layover on my next flight. So that's writing time.
That's perfect, Jason. Okay, archaeology often unveils stories from the past. How do you approach storytelling in your books to make historical narratives accessible and engaging to a wide audience?
Right, I like to think of it, a plot as it's like an onion. Because the way some thriller writers don't write this, but it's an onion. You keep peeling away layers of the onion. So you, the reader, are with my detective Geoffrey Flint, or with Hugh in the new books, and you're peeling away layers of this onion, finding out more and more about the story until it gets smaller and smaller and smaller down towards the middle. And it's a bit like digging an archaeological site. If I'm talking to schools about it, I'm saying it's like a cherry cake. An archaeological site is like a cherry cake. The first thing you do is you eat the cherry on the top, and then you lick the ice. Then you lick the icing off. Then you eat the first layer of sponge, and then you eat the jam in the middle, and then you've got the next layer of sponge, and then you've got the plate, which is what you're really after. And an archaeological excavation is like you work down from the top. You work from the present to the past. And so the archaeological mystery stories are sort of the same. You have to basically dig away the layers of the plot, the clues, if you like, to get to a solution. So that's the way I do it. And then the archaeology stories, in fact, the historical, I've got a lot of actual real archaeology and real history in. And some people and then writing about archaeology, which may be the reason I'm not as best-selling as some writers who write about it, because my heroes are archaeologists. They talk like archaeologists, and they think quite deeply about the past and the way it's interpreted. So the reader gets that as well. They don't just get, oh, we found a lovely diamond bracelet, isn't it gorgeous? They get you know, they get the whole thing.
All right, Jason. Okay, in your journey as an author and archaeologist, what challenges have you encountered, and how have you overcome them to continue contributing meaningfully to both fields?
Right. Well, there's actually the key challenge facing archaeologists is money. It's always money. There's never enough money to pay for the dig, the travel, the transport, getting people there, and it's a constant fight to actually get to get money for the sites, the digs, the publication, the post-publication, and then museums afterwards. I worked in museums for 13 years, and it was a constant fight to actually just keep them open.
And observation as well.
Yeah, that's right. And then being an author is not a path to riches either. Chief obstacle to being an author is actually getting through the barriers. It's getting an agent. It's getting published. It's not just writing the book, because writing the book's the easy bit these days.
Because as far as I know, Jason, a writer's core responsibility is to bring people from darkness to light. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
that's right.
You were telling the story, actually.
Yeah, and it's a real effort. And then once they are published, these days, there's publishing has changed a lot in the last 10 years with the advent of the internet. There's a lot of expectation on authors. There's a discussion about the difference between writers and authors. Writers just write things, and authors actually have to be this author person who goes to conferences and has a website and does blogs like this and does interviews and has a newsletter and does social media. There's a huge amount of demand now for an author to do things other than actually writing books.
Yeah, ChatGPT as well.
Yeah, and it's really challenging. Because you've not necessarily, somebody who's grown up through archaeology, which is a very sort of hand-to-mouth occupation, suddenly being in the world of PR and marketing and that sort of thing is actually a big challenge for a lot of authors I know, particularly some of the older authors, people sort of the age of, over the age of 40, over the age of 50, find the deluge of social media a real difficulty. And I think it's probably the biggest challenge now certainly faced by me and certainly by a lot of my colleagues. The sort of reality of publishing in modern world, when it's so easy for people to get a word processor and knock out 70,000, 80,000, 90,000 words, buy a cover, sometimes AI created now, and put it on KDP on the internet and then market it. There's so many books are shouting for attention. You've got to sort of worm your way to the front of the queue really and say, no, we're here too, we're writing decent books.
That's great. That's great, Jason. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a wonderful having you here. I'm learning from your experiences. Before we wrap up, is there anything you would like to share with our audience, or any message you would like to leave them with?
Well, I think if you're an aspiring writer, open up your laptop and start writing. I think that's what I would say. And then if you're interested in archaeology, get to the museum, find out if there's a local dig, and just get stuck in. It's been lovely to be here. Lovely to meet you.
Okay, I love the advice. Thank you so much again, Jason, for having us. Actually, thank you so much for joining us today, because I'm very glad that I have you, and I've learned a lot of new things from your side. I will definitely gonna apply in my life as well. Thank you so much again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Have a great day. Take care. Goodbye.